Hello and welcome back if you are back, and if not, welcome. Welcome. I hope you enjoy watching this today. This was a little over an hour and a half worth of footage, and it looks like it's going to be about 35 minutes after everything's said and done. So we'll see if I can talk for that long. It'll be a bit slower, maybe it'll be a little bit easier to see what I am doing. My biggest goal with slowing it down a bit more is that I want to make some shorts. I might go a little wild on making some shorts. That might have even been what brought you here to begin with. I really want to make a short around the picture frame because that turned out really well and felt effortless, and I considered doing a short for a lot of the individual frames to just kind of, see what I'm doing. Like right here, I decided to turn this grayscale because if this photo is from the earlier 1900s, then obviously it would make sense that it is grayscale. And it's just the little touches like this that made this project really fun. And I'm not done with it yet. Dear God, I'm still not done with it. Where you see it end today is where I am currently at. So I have everything drawn out, and all I have to do is add the actual lights that are going to flicker in the final product. And then once I get that done, I have to get the portrait that is going to be on the desk finished. And once I finally get that finished, then I can start piecing together the video. And I figured I would just record my video editing software while I did that, because I'm planning on exporting GIF by GIF. Yes, I say GIF, you can fight me on it, I don't care. I don't like sounding like I got something stuck in my throat. Y'all can say GIF all you want. And slowly import it into the editing software so I have a little more control, because like when it's zooming into the picture, I'm going to lower the opacity and make new outlines with new colors indicating who's who. I haven't really indicated what song I'm using for this animatic, but it's that animatic of "Do you think we would know each other in another universe?" It's that one, and it's really sweet, and that's why, it's whatever, but putting it into Vegas and editing it here will make it way easier than trying to edit all of it in Photoshop, because my issue is if I'm coloring it all the way 100% before putting all these frames where they need to be, it's just, I don't have a great mindset for animation because I always want to go balls to the wall, when in reality I need to take it one step at a time. So I have yet to actually make an animation up to this point because I haven't been able to get the line work, and then the base colors, and then the this and that, and the storyboards at the beginning. Like, it's just so many steps that I am completely unfamiliar with, that I just really haven't stepped into that realm yet. I have my smaller animations that I've done on Photoshop before, but very small, and it was really just making layers visible and invisible. So at this point, I'm just kind of adjusting all of the photos, making sure that they don't look empty, adding little extra details if I need to, making sure the lighting is all good, and making sure that they're not overlapping each other. Since I have some wicked ADHD, the ability to go from photo to photo to photo was really fun. It kind of helped this whole project stay fresh, where I didn't feel like I had to keep working on something when I felt dissatisfied with it. I could just literally leave it alone for weeks while I worked on the rest of the piece, and then when I came back to it, the flow felt a lot more normal. I knew how to blend better, etc., and the rest is history. So it was really great process. And then here I'm adding all the frames, which was like magic, bro. One of my biggest enemies is straight lines, and being able to use the box tool as a straight edge was very beneficial. The frames really just add a lot. They do. Like I said, I want to make it a Polaroid, so I did. This is me using the box tool to make the edges. Very good hack. You can also use a ruler on your tablet. The problem is I can never get the angle quite right, and it has the tendency to move around as well. And then here I waste a lot of time writing, and spoiler alert, but later on I end up fixing it and making it look better, and I also end up making the Polaroid a little bit shorter because it's a little too long where it is right here. So I do fix that later. Sorry for the spoilers. I know I'm terrible. I'm in the wrong here. I suck. But I still spend way too much time on it. You'll also notice that I have the tendency to go to the menu because I get so tired of trying to mess around with all the buttons and shortcuts in Photoshop, because a lot of times it feels very glitchy, not user friendly. So I just end up using the menu, which feels so much longer, but I still haven't taken the time to look into stuff, like how I haven't taken the time into why the RGB thing keeps happening. I could very easily figure that out, but I just haven't. When I'm ready to draw, I just want to draw. I don't want to look shit up. And that's I'm going to bring that up again later because it's relevant whenever I start drawing the frame. So here I'm still just making the frames. Again, it really pulls it all together, putting frames around the photos. So what I was just talking about with those frames, you saw how short I looked at that. This video is sped up, I think, 8 times speed. So that's how long I looked at photo frames on Google, and that's as long as I looked at them. But this turned out so well. Again, spoilers, I'm not going to get too into it, but I was just kind of winging it a lot. I mean, I'm very observant whenever it comes to smaller details, especially whenever I'm looking at art, because I've talked a lot about how art, a lot of it is just making shortcuts in order to make things seem more complex than they really are. So if you pay attention to other artists and see what they're doing and you see how they're doing it, it's very, very easy to streamline the process and naturally feel what you need to do. It's like they say how if you use references long enough, you're not going to need them eventually because you've looked at them so much and you've felt them so much with your drawings that you don't need to look it up anymore. So it's kind of like that sentiment. I still don't do a great job at looking up references. I do look them up when things are tough. I do look them up for hands a lot, but most of the time I don't feel the need to look up references because I have enough of a grasp on anatomy that in my style I can make it work. But don't ever underestimate references. Any artist will talk day and night about how references are important, and it is, especially if you're just starting out. You need to be sure to look at references. It makes everything so much easier. So obviously you can see me like copy and pasting it to make everything even, and this is a big reason why I prefer digital art, because you can do stuff like this that would either be very, very difficult to do on paper, or it wouldn't be perfect, or you would mess it up a lot, or you would have to redo it, or it might even just mess up the entire thing that you're working on. So it can be really frustrating, and that's why I love digital art. It's so malleable. It's whatever you want it to be, you can make it that way as long as you put in the work. And sure, it takes time. It takes a lot of time for me to make art, honestly. But with this frame, ooh, I felt like I was on top of the world. Look at me erasing all those edges. This is a very satisfying part of the video. If you're not watching, shame on you. Shake my head. Look at that. And just the way that some of the lines are thinner than others just really kind of, I don't know, it really tied it together for me. The lines were very smooth on this. The way I erased around it, oh, gorgeous, beautiful. I'm just watching, you know, there's so much to be enamored about. me just kind of erasing all the lines. I think at this point the layers are combined, or I'm about to combine them to make one big line art layer for this picture frame. Like, as I was making this, I was delighted, my guys. And then I did this little swan, although it looks like a duck. That was, yeah, phew, that's how I felt. But the swan was a very spontaneous thing, and I really liked it. And here I messed around with different colors for the frame. For a second I felt like I was playing The Sims because I was experimenting with all the colors. I decided on this one. And then here I'm just adjusting the frame to make sure that the edges line up to where they would be in the frame, and then add the color, which was very fun. This part was a bit like a coloring book. Coloring has always been my favorite part of drawing and art in general, and I know I've said that before. And a lot of artists feel the opposite way. They feel like line art is the best part. I disagree. Line art's the most stressful for me. So for the picture frame to turn out so well was just euphoric. It was amazing. And then coloring afterwards was just so simple because of it. And I just fill in the color. I tend to not use the selection tool in Photoshop because it's a pain in the ass, and for me it's literally easier to just erase when I go outside of the lines and color when I erase inside of the lines than to sit there and try to get the select tool to work and etc. Selecting things can be handy, but oftentimes I use very thin lines. It just doesn't end up working. And then in other cases, like how this picture frame is technically on multiple layers, so even if I try to use the select tool on it, it will not work properly because no matter which way you try to select it, it's going to be open-ended and it's going to try to select the whole page. I'm pretty sure that there's a way to use the select tool like a brush in Photoshop, like there is in Sai. I just can't remember. And again, like I'm always like, I want to draw, I want to do art, I don't want to look stuff up, I don't want to remember how to use Photoshop. I'm just going to figure it out as I go, because that's usually how I do it anyway. That's how I learned Vegas when I was like 11 years old. I was like, I want to use the software, I'm not going to sit here and watch these tutorials, I'm going to learn the basics and then learn things as I need them. And that's just the easiest way for me to figure things out. I was also very proud of this part. I really like how pretty these little pieces look on the bottom. Here I'm fixing her face. I had noticed that her eyes were definitely too dark for the painting, so I went in and I lowered the opacity, but then I had the issue with the layer beneath it still being white from the eye whites, and then I finally ended up fixing that. But then I struggled with the shape of her eye for a little bit. And that red on her face is from the RGB mask. And the way that I think it works is that there's one big RGB mask and it's one big layer. So anytime you draw on this RGB mask, it's always on that one layer. And it doesn't make sense why these layers keep connecting to the RGB mask, and it's annoying. But by the end of it, I'm able to get the red edge off of the painting, and I'm also able to get the red off of her face. This is where I go in with white. I thought that it would maybe possibly help her eyes pop a little bit more. It didn't, so I just undid it and I left it as is. And then I accidentally did this. I hate it when I accidentally make these shapes on Photoshop. I'm like, stop. Ugh. Over here, I get back to the picture frame, and then I get to put in the highlights. This part was so much fun. Even if I wouldn't have ended up blending it, and it would have looked like this at the end, like cell shading, it would have looked really great. Like, even how it looks right here, that's awesome right there. That's some great shading right there. So I was really, really proud of the shading. So I was just using the heck out of the water brush tool. I had finally really gotten a handle on it, how I wanted to use it. I blend all this in really, really nicely. I thought this looked great by the time I was at this point. Yay! See, look at me go. I was so excited. I drew a heart and everything. And then I'm not done with that yet, but I go over to this picture frame because I'm like, I need to add, you know, the lighting and the shading over here. And I did. It's much more simple, short and sweet, all that you need. I go back over here to her, to the picture frame. I'm just so happy with this picture frame. So right now I'm just kind of cleaning up the lines, cleaning up the edges, making sure it looks all nice. I know I could have done more to make it look more like wood, but with the way that my style is, not only is there no need to, but it would just take a lot more extra time. I could make it look a lot more elegant and regal, but realistically, how it looks here is already very impressive in my personal opinion. For some reason, I wanted to give the swan a gemstone eye. It does look like a goose though, like a duck. It's supposed to be a swan. It is what it is. And then now I finally have the motivation to go over to this photo over here and finish it up. Like mentioned before, this is Seth with his daughter and his son, his eldest son. It is the only photo of him with his eldest son. And yeah, just going through, erasing all the extra color. Again, I highly prefer doing it this way. Even beside the fact that the selection tool sucks, it's just very satisfying and fun to do it this way. And then here I am going online and I just looked up 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s photographs. I looked up when color photography became a thing. I looked up when photography became a thing. I just kind of wanted to get my facts straight because this picture would have been taken around like the 40s, 50s. I'm not really sure. And I just wanted to make sure that it was a time period where there was colorized photos. And it turns out that colorized photos have been around since the late 1800s. It's just, you know, like most technology, it took a very long time to become easily accessible. And there are many videos made on photography and the stages of photography when things were accessible and when people had to sit still for 10 hours for long exposure type stuff. So there's all kinds of history that can be said. I finally settle on the colors and I get her body shape correct. And I kind of fill in his tie just as a placeholder for now. I focus on her to get her finished up. I used a red that was too gray, so I made it more red. Here's some half-ass shading on this guy. Took me a little bit to get the background color I wanted, but Photoshop was having like a seizure on me, so I didn't spend too long on that. Like, Photoshop just really wants to fight me sometimes. And then I kind of overlay it with a sepia-like color to kind of indicate that it's an older photo. And then I pump out this bad boy, which I'm also going to make a short. Like, it's nothing, bro. Like, you know, basic shapes right now, right? Nothing to call home about. But then check this out. Whoa, okay, alright, there's some depth to this tree, okay. Oh, you're coloring it in? Alright. Well, there's still some white spots in between, my friend. Oh, is there? Is there? Oh, well, I think I know what to do with that. Fill it in with more color. And then I just go in with the blending tool. Thank goodness I'm used to the blending tool by now. And look at this shit. In like 10 seconds, my guy, it becomes a somewhat realistic tree. Look at that. That looks so good. I was on a roll here, my guy. And then I just kind of lazily throw in some effects. It's, again, nothing to call home about, but it was nice, it's pleasant. And then as a final effect, I throw in some lighting in the background, which I think kind of helps to make it pop. Much like everything in this painting, there were a lot of details I thought about adding and that I wanted to add. But realistically, these images behind him are so tiny that I'm not even worried about it at this point. This is the least complex thing in the whole painting. I decided that Seth Fargo at one point won a pie contest, and this is when he won first place for his pie. I'm not sure what year this was, but he was quite proud and he had to take a picture. I know that I'm using really simple blending methods when it comes to most of this stuff, and as I get used to Photoshop, I will get better at it. So here you can see kind of what I'm talking about. Like, the watercolor brush has a tendency to pick up color even if you have it marked that you don't want it to do that. And I think it has something to do with like wetness and the drag and whatever. So I decided to move on to the picture frame shadows. And here I realize, oh right, the smudge tool is actually really what we want to use for when you're trying to smudge areas with no opacity. As you saw in the painting, it wanted to drag around all the colors, and I was like, oh fine, I give up, whatever. But then I remembered that the smudge tool is what you want to use whenever you are working with an area that has light opacity. So it's been a thing to learn how to juggle the smudge tool and the watercolor tool for sure. Here I am going back over the picture frame. It needed a little bit of adjusting as far as perspective went, and I wanted to add a little screw, make it a little more realistic, and later on I'll make that screw a little less dark so that it blends in better. At this point, I decided to go back to Claire and her portrait because, like I said, it'll be like Seth and Claire are having a conversation, even though she is deceased and he's not actually talking to her, but it's going to be cute and sweet and all that. So I decided to go back to this because this is technically going to be the second scene, and then the first scene is also going to be the third scene, if that makes sense. So I wanted to make sure to get her shape right, because right now her anatomy is not right. Her head is the worst part because her head is not on correctly, and I kind of adjust it here, but I still am not happy with where it is, and I'm going to just kind of have to move things around and figure it out. But here I am just kind of like, you know, filling in where I did move. I trying to get my shadows right, even though right now that doesn't really matter. I don't know why I try to focus on shadows so early on, but whatever, it could be worse. Yeah, I'm just kind of trying to get her shape and clean up the mess in general. I realized here that I made her arms too skinny, so I will have to go back in and make them a little wider. But that is a thing for later me. Here I am fixing up the hair a little bit. I do want it to flow because this photo is supposed to be her spinning, but it's not really a photo. It's actually going to be a painting by Seth, another painting by Seth. So I need to make sure that the momentum looks like she is spinning around in a circle. So I need to make sure that the hair looks right. I actually think that I need to make the hair a little less voluptuous. That's the word, right? Voluptuous. But I will get to that later. I didn't quite get there today. I'm also kind of putting where her mouth should be, and I kind of fixed the lines around the nose. I still need to fix her face, but I was kind of done with it. I wanted to move on to the next thing. Like I said, that's a really cool thing about working on a big project like this, is when I get bored or tired or frustrated with one part, I can just go to another part, and by the time I get back to everything, it just feels like a natural part of the process rather than a block. So here I go back to the Polaroid, and I decide to, you know, adjust the colors a little bit, make sure it's not pure white, and then give it a little bit of yellow lighting. Right here I'm struggling because Photoshop is fighting me, but I do erase the letters. Like I said, it would be all for naught. I end up, you know, rewriting the letters. I made it a little bit shorter, and I do like it a lot better the way that it looks the second time around, because my handwriting was a lot neater and I knew what I was going to write. I did the math of how old Matthew would have been in 2013. Matthew is his youngest, so I wanted to make sure that there were no discrepancies there. Any little detail that I know I can cover my ass on, I always make sure I do it. Like, just look at like Arcane, man. Like, everything in Arcane is so deliberate, and like they frame by frame, they just put so much into it, and that's just kind of like the vibe I'm going for with all of my creative stuff. I want to just smash as much as I can into it and just make it as great as it can be. So this is me just kind of observing my picture frame, because clearly I want to go over it with the yellow to add some shading to the lighting, which this also turned out really well. I mean, honestly, when you have a base as good as this picture frame, it would have been really hard to mess up the lighting on it, but it just looks fantastic, man. I'm really happy with this picture frame. So I put in some yellow. I realized that there probably shouldn't be any yellow on the left side. It's in the middle of the room, so it probably wouldn't reach. And I didn't want to take the yellow off all the way. I didn't want to make all the lines black, but it just kind of turned out that way anyway, because I did want to give a strong sense of lighting, but I didn't want the black lines to get washed out too bad. Yeah, I'm definitely making a short of this picture frame, because like, look at this picture frame. And that brief moment of looking at sources was the only time I spent looking at sources. Like, this was from my ass, bro. Like, I just made this up as I went. I looked at reference photos for like 2 minutes tops. This is when I realized that the wallpaper bits are actually quite ugly, because I had used the select tool and the color had bled out a little bit. I also wanted to erase the bits around the tan outline that's around her, if you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, you'll see it in a moment. But first, I work on getting rid of those color bleeds on the wallpaper patterns. This was also pretty cathartic as well. It was very pleasing to do this. And this is when I realized, since I erased the yellow on the black lines earlier, I might as well do it again. Alright, here I am cleaning up the wallpaper pattern. I'm erasing them where the outline is around her, so then that way they're not like overlapping that outline. At this point, the colors are looking great. And then I add on the circle on the back of the picture frame because that's how picture frames work. And yeah, just those little details that I like. There were so many details I wanted to add. And then I bring up this background layer that I had sitting here forever, and then I split it up because I put something in the foreground, and then I have these lights, and these lights are what's going to be blinking in the animation, in the animatic. Sorry, it's kind of going to be an animation, but nothing's going to be moving in the way you would expect. It's an animatic. So I draw one light bulb. Look at that cute little light bulb. It looks so good. And then all that I do is I copy and paste the light bulb. And I made sure to lower the opacity so that whenever I am ready to add the lights, it will look like glass on top of the lights. And it'll be perfect. It'll be peachy. It'll be awesome. So I just copy and pasted it a bunch. I had a fight with Photoshop a bit. What else is new? And then I, just basically set them up. I tried to even them out properly. Hopefully I did, so I don't have to fix that later. And it should look pretty neat whenever it's done, because all of the lighting that'll come off of these lights will be on its own layer so that I can properly animate it. And it's going to be fun, because simple animations like lights they just tickle me. And here we are at the end. Wow, I managed to talk for 30 minutes. And thankfully I didn't get too distracted, so I was able to kind of talk about what you were watching. I hope you like it. It's coming along really, really nicely. It looks really pretty. All of the colors work really well. I'm very proud of my shading and my lighting. I still definitely have some things I need to work on. There are definitely some things that I wish I could do and add, but to do so would just make this take so much longer. And this is already a very meaty project. But on the plus side, this scene that I am drawing is the most difficult part of this animatic, because the rest of it is just stills. And not only are they stills, but they are not detailed stills. They are all going to be cel shaded, and I'm going to lower the opacity on them and have another layer on top of them with the two colors that represent these two characters. So it'll be very fun. As I mentioned before, if you want to look at the art meme that I'm referring to, if you haven't already, it's kind of been everywhere. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. It's Lemu something on YouTube or wherever. Whenever I'm trying to find it, I usually look up alternate universe drawing meme on YouTube. So if you want to look into that, I encourage you to do so. And once you know what that is, if you didn't already, now you know what to expect. I'm very excited to make this because it's simple enough that I can do it. And what's even better is I can record these videos while I make it. So thank you very much for joining me again. I'm going to make a bunch of shorts. Hopefully that's what brought you here. If you made it to the end, you're the go, bro. I've been definitely struggling to get consistent views, so if you could like and leave a comment, that would be the most beneficial thing, other than subscribing. I typically don't ask people to subscribe. I know it is quite the commitment, but if you feel like supporting an artist who probably has potential to create wonderful stories that impact everybody around the world, then maybe I'm your guy, and maybe your help could help me help the world or something. But anyway, thank you for joining me. I hope to see you next time. You're awesome. have a great weekend or day. I don't know when this will be posted. And I'll see you next time. I hope you stick around. I'll see ya.